Imagine standing in chains, stripped of your name, your past, your future. The crowd above you roars, not for you, but for your death. You are property, a thing, a weapon Rome will use until you break. But what happens when the weapon remembers it was once a man? This is the story of Spartacus, a gladiator who became a general, a slave who raised an army, and a rebel who brought the Roman Republic to its knees. His name echoes through history, not because Rome honored him, but because Rome could never forget him. For 3 years, he turned the ancient world upside down. He defeated legions. He humiliated consuls. He proved that even the greatest empire on earth could bleed. But this is not a story with heroes and villains. It's a story about what happens when human beings are treated as less than human, and what they're willing to do to reclaim their dignity. If you've ever wondered what one person can do against impossible odds, or what price freedom demands, then stay with me. And if this story moves you, if it makes you think, hit that like button and subscribe. Because history belongs to those who refuse to be forgotten. Let's begin where Spartacus did, at the very bottom. We don't know much about Spartacus before he became Spartacus. The ancient sources, written by Romans, his enemies, tell us he was Thracian from the rugged highlands north of Greece. Thrace was a land of warriors, a place where Rome's reach was expanding, but not yet absolute. Some accounts say he served as an auxiliary soldier in the Roman army before deserting. Others say he was captured in war. What we do know is this: by the time he reached Italy, he was a slave. And Rome, in the 1st century BCE, was a machine built on slavery. This was not slavery as a distant economic system. It was everywhere, in the fields, the mines, the kitchens, the bedrooms. Slaves built the roads. They harvested the grain. They died in the arenas for entertainment. Rome had conquered the Mediterranean world, and the spoils of that conquest were human beings. Hundreds of thousands of them. War, captives, debtors, the children of slaves, all funneled into a system that treated them as tools with flesh. Spartacus was one of millions. His name, if that even was his name, meant nothing. He had no legal rights, no protection, no future. He existed to serve, to obey, to disappear. But somewhere inside that erasure, something survived. A memory of autonomy. A refusal to accept what Rome said he was. And that refusal would become a war. To understand what Spartacus did, you have to understand what slavery was in Rome. This wasn't just exploitation. It was dehumanization by design. Slaves could be beaten, raped, killed, often with no consequence. They could be separated from their families, sold across provinces, worked until their bodies gave out. Some were treated well, even educated, but that mercy was arbitrary. It could be revoked at any moment. A slave's life was entirely at the discretion of their master. And the cruelty wasn't just physical. It was existential. You could be a king in your homeland one day and a mine worker the next. You could be a scholar, a soldier, a parent, and Rome would strip all of that away, reduce you to a commodity, a price, a function. The Roman economy depended on this system. The great estates of Italy, the latifundia, were worked by slave gangs. The mines of Spain and Sardinia consumed thousands of enslaved bodies. Household slaves cooked, cleaned, and raised the children of their masters. Skilled slaves worked as accountants, tutors, doctors. Rome's prosperity was built on stolen labor. Its monuments, its roads, its aqueducts, all of it constructed by people who would never be free, never be thanked, never be remembered. But there was one category of slave that lived under a different kind of pressure. The gladiators. Gladiators weren't just slaves, they were investments. Expensive ones. They were housed in special schools, fed better than field slaves, trained by professionals. Some even achieved fame. The best could win their freedom, though few ever did. But don't mistake that for kindness. Gladiators existed to kill and die for public amusement. Their lives were extended only so their deaths could be more spectacular. They lived in a prison designed to produce violence, and every day they woke up knowing they might not see the next. The games themselves were ritual spectacles of power. They demonstrated Rome's dominance over conquered peoples, its control over life and death, its ability to turn human suffering into entertainment. When a gladiator died, well, bravely, without pleading, the crowd cheered. When he died poorly, they jeered. Either way, he died. This was the world Spartacus entered when he was sold to a gladiator school in Capua, just north of modern-day Naples. And it was here, in this concentrated crucible of controlled brutality, that rebellion would ignite. The ludus at Capua was run by a man named Lentulus Batiatus. Wealthy, connected, ambitious. To him, gladiators were products. He fed them, trained them, and rented them out to cities across Italy for games. Spartacus arrived here sometime around 73 BCE, along with dozens of other men. Gauls, Germans, Thracians, warriors from every corner of Rome's empire, all chained together by circumstance. They trained with wooden swords under the eyes of guards. They sparred until their bodies broke and healed and broke again. They learned to fight in pairs, in teams, in styles designed to entertain crowds. The Murmillo with his heavy armor and sword. The Retiarius with his net and trident. The Thraex, Spartacus fighting style, with curved sword and small shield. Some became friends. Others became rivals. All of them understood the math. Every time you stepped into the arena, your odds of survival decreased. Among them were men whose names history barely remembers, but who would become Spartacus' inner circle. Crixus, a Gaul, strong, proud, uncompromising. He'd been a warrior in his homeland, captured and enslaved. Enemaus, a fellow Thracian, who shared Spartacus' language and perhaps his dreams of home. Castus and Gannicus, whose origins are lost, but whose loyalty would define the rebellion. There were others too, men whose names we'll never know. Women, because contrary to popular belief, some gladiators were women, though fewer and less documented. And there were the support staff, the enslaved trainers and cooks, and servants who made the ludus function. They weren't revolutionaries. Not yet. They were survivors calculating the odds, enduring one more day. But life in the ludus wasn't just physical training. It was psychological warfare, the constant threat of the arena, the knowledge that your owner could send you to die on a whim, for profit, for entertainment, the humiliation of being paraded before crowds, reduced to a spectacle, denied even the dignity of privacy in death. Something was shifting. We don't know exactly what triggered it. Maybe it was a punishment too cruel. Maybe it was the realization that even fame in the arena was just another cage. Maybe Batiatus pushed too hard, took too much, reminded them once too often that they were property. Maybe it was simply the accumulation of indignity, day after day, year after year, being told you were nothing. Whatever it was, a plan began to form. Whispered conversations, careful alliances, men who had been forced to fight each other, now conspiring together. A plan that would change everything. The ludus at Capua was run by a man named Lentulus Betrayals. Wealthy, connected, ambitious. To him, gladiators were products. He fed them, trained them, and rented them out to cities across Italy for games. Spartacus arrived here sometime around 73 BCE, along with dozens of other men. Gauls, Germans, Thracians, warriors from every corner of Rome's empire, all chained together by circumstance. They trained with wooden swords under the eyes of guards. They sparred until their bodies broke and healed and broke again. They learned to fight in pairs, in teams, in styles designed to entertain crowds. The Murmillo with his heavy armor and sword. The Retiarius with his net and trident. The Thraex, Spartacus fighting style, with curved sword and small shield. Some became friends, others became rivals. All of them understood the math. Every time you stepped into the arena, your odds of survival decreased. Among them were men whose names history barely remembers, but who would become Spartacus' inner circle. Crixus, a Gaul, strong, proud, uncompromising. He'd been a warrior in his homeland, captured and enslaved. Enemaus, a fellow Thracian, who shared Spartacus' language and perhaps his dreams of home. Castus and Gannicus, whose origins are lost, but whose loyalty would define the rebellion. There were others too, men whose names we'll never know. Women, because contrary to popular belief, some gladiators were women, though fewer and less documented. And there were the support staff, the enslaved trainers and cooks, and servants who made the ludus function. They weren't revolutionaries. Not yet. They were survivors calculating the odds, enduring one more day. But life in the ludus wasn't just physical training. It was psychological warfare, the constant threat of the arena, the knowledge that your owner could send you to die on a whim, for profit, for entertainment, the humiliation of being paraded before crowds, reduced to a spectacle, denied even the dignity of privacy in death. Something was shifting. We don't know exactly what triggered it. Maybe it was a punishment too cruel. Maybe it was the realization that even fame in the arena was just another cage. Maybe Betrayals pushed too hard, took too much, reminded them once too often that they were property. Maybe it was simply the accumulation of indignity, day after day, year after year, being told you were nothing. Whatever it was, a plan began to form. Whispered conversations, careful alliances, men who had been forced to fight each other, now conspiring together. A plan that would change everything. The ludus at Capua was run by a man named Lentulus Betrayals. Wealthy, connected, ambitious. To him, gladiators were products. He fed them, trained them, and rented them out to cities across Italy for games. Spartacus arrived here sometime around 73 BCE, along with dozens of other men. Gauls, Germans, Thracians, warriors from every corner of Rome's empire, all chained together by circumstance. They trained with wooden swords under the eyes of guards. They sparred until their bodies broke and healed and broke again. They learned to fight in pairs, in teams, in styles designed to entertain crowds. The Murmillo with his heavy armor and sword. The Retiarius with his net and trident. The Thraex, Spartacus fighting style, with curved sword and small shield. Some became friends, others became rivals. All of them understood the math. Every time you stepped into the arena, your odds of survival decreased. Among them were men whose names history barely remembers, but who would become Spartacus' inner circle. Crixus, a Gaul, strong, proud, uncompromising. He'd been a warrior in his homeland, captured and enslaved. Enemaus, a fellow Thracian who shared Spartacus' language and perhaps his dreams of home. Castus and Gannicus, whose origins are lost, but whose loyalty would define the rebellion. There were others too, men whose names we'll never know. Women, because contrary to popular belief, some gladiators were women, though fewer and less documented. And there were the support staff, the enslaved trainers and cooks, and servants who made the Ludus function. They weren't revolutionaries. Not yet. They were survivors calculating the odds, enduring one more day. But life in the Ludus wasn't just physical training. It was psychological warfare, the constant threat of the arena. The knowledge that your owner could send you to die on a whim, for profit, for entertainment. The humiliation of being paraded before crowds, reduced to a spectacle, denied even the dignity of privacy in death. Something was shifting. We don't know exactly what triggered it. Maybe it was a punishment too cruel. Maybe it was the realization that even fame in the arena was just another cage. Maybe Betrayals pushed too hard, took too much, reminded them once too often that they were property. Maybe it was simply the accumulation of indignity, day after day, year after year, being told you were nothing. Whatever it was, a plan began to form. Whispered conversations, careful alliances, men who have been forced to fight each other, now conspiring together. A plan that would change everything. What started as 70 men became hundreds, then thousands. Slaves fled plantations across southern Italy. Shepherds abandoned their flocks. Gladiators from other schools heard the news and risked everything to join. Even some free peasants, crushed by debt, resentful of Rome's aristocracy, seeing no future in the Republic's rigged economy, threw in their lot with Spartacus. This was not a disciplined army. It was a mass movement of the dispossessed, held together by desperation and hope. And Spartacus, somehow, turned them into a fighting force. He organized them, divided them into units based on origin and language. Gauls fought alongside Gauls, Germans with Germans, Thracians together. This created cohesion, but also potential fracture points that would matter later. He trained them. Not everyone could be a gladiator, but everyone could learn to hold a spear, to move in formation, to follow orders. Spartacus knew Roman tactics because he'd fought in or against Roman wars. He understood discipline, supply lines, morale. And he had something Rome's generals often lacked: the absolute loyalty of people who had nothing left to lose. His followers weren't fighting for glory or conquest. They were fighting for survival, for dignity, for the radical idea that their lives belonged to them. But unity was fragile. Crixus and other Gallic leaders wanted revenge. Immediate, bloody, total. They wanted to burn the villas of slave owners, punish the masters who tormented them, settle every score. For them, this was a war of retribution. Spartacus, it seems, wanted something else: survival, escape, a chance to go home. The sources don't agree on his motives, and they probably simplified what was a complex, evolving situation. Maybe he wanted to lead his army north, across the Alps, so they could return to their homelands and live free. Maybe he wanted to build a new society outside Rome's reach, a community of the formerly enslaved. Maybe he just wanted to live without chains and hadn't thought much beyond that immediate goal. Leadership is rarely as clear as we want it to be in hindsight. What's certain is that the rebel army faced impossible choices. They needed food, which meant raiding Roman estates. They needed weapons, which meant defeating Roman forces. They needed new recruits to replace the inevitable losses. Every victory brought more followers. Every defeat would mean crucifixion for the survivors. And every day they remained in Italy, Rome grew more determined to destroy them. But whatever his plan, Rome wasn't going to let happen. The Republic was about to respond with the full weight of its military power. At first, Rome sent a small militia force, 3,000 men under a praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber. Praetors were magistrates, not generals. Glaber was a politician given a military command, probably because the Senate thought this would be easy. Round up some slaves, execute the leaders, restore order. They surrounded Spartacus' camp on Mount Vesuvius, blocked the only path down, and waited. Starvation would do the work. No need to risk Roman lives in an assault. It was a reasonable plan. It should have worked, but Spartacus didn't wait. His men crafted ropes from wild vines that grew on the mountainside. At night, while the Romans slept, they descended the sheer face of the mountain. The side Glaber hadn't bothered to guard because it seemed impossible to climb. They came down in darkness and silence, and they attacked the Roman camp from behind. Glaber's forces were routed. The militia fled. The rebels captured weapons, armor, supplies, everything they needed. Rome was humiliated, so they sent more troops. A larger force, better equipped, led by a praetor named Publius Varinius. Spartacus defeated them too. Then he defeated them again. Every victory brought more recruits. By 72 BCE, Spartacus commanded an army estimated at 70,000, possibly more. Some sources claim over 100,000, though ancient numbers are notoriously unreliable. What matters is the scale. This was no longer a band of escaped slaves. It was a military force capable of defeating Roman legions in open battle. They moved through southern Italy like a storm. They defeated Roman forces sent against them. They raided supply depots, freed more slaves, seized equipment. They didn't just survive, they thrived. And with each defeat, panic spread through Rome. This wasn't just a slave revolt anymore. It was an existential threat. If slaves across Italy believed they could win, the entire social order could collapse. The Republic's wealth, its power, its identity, all of it rested on slavery. The Senate began to understand what they were facing. This wasn't a policing problem. It was a war. Spartacus had to be destroyed, completely, publicly, in a way that would terrify anyone else who might think of rebellion. And for that, Rome turned to its consuls, the highest elected officials with the authority to command legions. Both consuls for 72 BCE were dispatched with armies. Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus marched south. His colleague Lucius Gellius Publicola moved to intercept. But even they underestimated Spartacus. The rebels defeated them both, separately, in battles that should have been impossible for an army of slaves to win. That's when Rome realized they needed someone different. Not just a politician playing general, but someone willing to do whatever it took. Someone who understood that crushing Spartacus required something Rome hated to admit: fear. His name was Marcus Licinius Crassus. By 72 BCE, Spartacus had done the impossible. His army had moved north through Italy, defeating every force sent against them. They'd reached the Po Valley in northern Italy near the Alps. The way home, for the Gauls, the Germans, the Thracians, was open. The Alps were right there. Beyond them lay Gaul, Germania, Thrace, lands where Rome's power was weaker, where they could disappear into their homelands, live as free people. All they had to do was cross, and then Spartacus stopped. We don't know why. The sources contradict each other, and they were all written by Romans with their own agendas. but we can piece together possibilities. Some ancient historians say his army refused to leave. They'd tasted victory, seized wealth from Roman estates, and wanted more. Why run when they were winning? Why abandon the plunder and return to hardscrabble tribal existence? Others say Spartacus himself reconsidered. Maybe he realized that even if they crossed the Alps, Rome would hunt them forever. The Republic never forgave rebellion. They would send armies north year after year until every last rebel was crucified. Maybe he believed they could negotiate. That Rome, faced with the cost of continued war, might bargain, might offer land, freedom, peace, or maybe the weight of leading 70,000 desperate people with no clear destination and winter approaching simply became too much. Leadership isn't just making bold decisions. It's managing impossible logistics, mediating between factions, keeping hope alive when everyone is exhausted. We'll never know his true reasoning, but we know what happened next. The army turned south. This decision fractured the rebellion. Crixus and a large Gallic contingent, possibly 30,000 people, split off. They'd had enough of Spartacus' caution. They wanted revenge. They wanted to march on Rome itself, to burn the Senate, to make every slave owner pay. It was a fatal mistake. Roman forces, now reorganizing under better leadership, hunted Crixus down. They caught his army in the foothills of the Apennines. The battle was brutal. Crixus died fighting. Thousands of his followers were slaughtered. The survivors scattered or were captured and crucified. Spartacus kept moving with the remainder of his forces, now trailed by Roman legions, his options narrowing with every mile. The rebellion that might have ended in escape, in survival, in some kind of freedom, that rebellion was now hurtling toward confrontation, toward a final reckoning with Rome. And Rome finally was ready. Marcus Licinius Crassus was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He'd made his fortune through real estate speculation, silver mines, and the slave trade itself. He was a financier, a politician, a man who understood that in Rome, money was power and power was everything. But Crassus craved something he didn't have: military glory. His rival Pompey was winning fame in Spain. Julius Caesar, still young, was building his reputation. Crassus had wealth, but wealth without glory meant you were just a banker. To truly matter in Rome, you needed to be a conqueror. When the Senate gave him command against Spartacus, he saw his opportunity. But Crassus understood what the previous commanders hadn't. This wasn't about glory in battle. It was about restoring Rome's authority, its image, its dominance. It was about proving that rebellion against Rome was suicide. So when he took command, Crassus did something that shocked even Romans accustomed to brutality. One of his legions had broken and fled from Spartacus' forces, a humiliating defeat. Crassus could have punished the commander, could have executed a few men as examples. Instead, he revived an ancient punishment called decimation. The entire legion was divided into groups of 10. Each group drew lots. 1 man in 10 was selected by chance, not by guilt or cowardice, and beaten to death by his 9 companions. 500 men died, chosen by lottery, killed by their fellow soldiers. Men who'd fought together, eaten together, now forced to murder their friends with clubs and stones. It was a message: fear me more than you fear the enemy. And it worked. Crassus rebuilt discipline. He reinforced his legions with fresh troops. He brought in cavalry and siege engineers. And he began a massive construction project, a fortification across the entire toe of Italy. A wall, ditches, palisades, 40 miles of continuous barrier from coast to coast, trapping Spartacus in the southern peninsula like an animal in a cage. Meanwhile, Spartacus tried desperate measures. He negotiated with Cilician pirates to ferry his army to Sicily. The plan made sense. Sicily had a history of slave revolts. If they could reach the island, they might spark another uprising, create a rebel stronghold Rome couldn't easily assault. Spartacus paid the pirates in advance. Gold and silver looted from Roman estates. But the pirates betrayed him. They took his gold and vanished. Maybe Rome bribed them. Maybe they simply took the easy money. Either way, Spartacus was trapped. Behind him, Crassus' wall and 8 legions. Ahead, the sea. Around him, an army of exhausted, starving people who'd followed him this far and now faced annihilation. The trap was closing. Spartacus tried to break through Crassus' fortifications. His forces attacked at night, filling in the ditches with earth and debris, sacrificing hundreds to create a breach. Some got through, but the wall held, and Spartacus, surrounded, outnumbered, running out of supplies and options, had one choice left. Fight. One final battle. Winner takes everything. In 71 BCE, somewhere in southern Italy. The exact location is lost to history. The final battle began. Spartacus knew he couldn't win, not in any conventional sense. Crassus had 8 legions, 40,000 trained soldiers. Spartacus' army, depleted by defeats and desertion, probably numbered around 30 to 40,000. And they were exhausted, hungry, many of them sick. But he could make Rome pay. He could ensure that even in defeat, his army would be remembered, that the price of crushing them would be measured in Roman blood. He formed his men into ranks, gave orders in a dozen languages, prepared them as best he could, and according to legend, he did something that's become symbolic of his final stand. Before the battle, Spartacus was brought his horse. Instead of mounting it, he drew his sword and killed it. No retreat, no escape. If he was going to die, it would be here, fighting. The message to his followers was clear. We stand together. We fight together. We die together if we must. But we die free. The fighting was savage. Spartacus' forces broke through Roman lines more than once. They inflicted heavy casualties. They fought with the desperation of people who knew capture meant crucifixion. Every man, woman, and teenager who could hold a weapon fought that day. But they were surrounded, exhausted, outnumbered. Crassus' legions pressed from all sides, using the discipline and coordination that made Rome's army the most effective fighting force in the ancient world. And in the chaos, Spartacus disappeared. The sources say he fought his way toward Crassus himself, trying to reach the general to end it personally, to kill the man who trapped them, to take Rome's champion with him into death. But he was cut down before he got close, wounded repeatedly, surrounded, fighting until the end. His body was never identified. He died somewhere in the mass of the fallen, indistinguishable from the thousands who died beside him. No memorial, no burial, no recognition. Just another corpse on a battlefield full of them. When the fighting ended, 6,000 prisoners were taken. Men too wounded to fight, too exhausted to run. Crassus lined them up along the Appian Way, the main road from Capua to Rome, one every 40 meters for over 100 miles. And he crucified them all. Crucifixion is designed to be slow. The condemned could hang for days, suffocating gradually, exposed to sun and scavengers. It was meant to be seen, to be remembered, to terrify. This is what happens when you defy Rome. Their bodies were left to rot for months. Every traveler on the road saw them. Every slave working the nearby field saw them. The message was unmistakable. But here's what's interesting. Rome never found Spartacus' body. Maybe it was lost in the mass of dead. Maybe his followers hid it to prevent Rome from desecrating it. Maybe he actually survived and died later, though no reliable source suggests this. The absence matters, because it meant Rome couldn't parade his corpse, couldn't give the rebellion a clear, definitive end. Spartacus remained, in a sense, undefeated, not in victory, but in the refusal to give Rome its perfect conclusion. The immediate aftermath of Spartacus' rebellion reshaped Roman politics and military policy in ways that would echo for decades. Crassus had won, but his triumph was incomplete. The Senate denied him a full triumph, the highest military honor, because he'd only defeated slaves, not a foreign enemy. He received the lesser ovatio instead. It was a calculated insult, and Crassus never forgot it. To make matters worse, Pompey arrived from Spain just in time to intercept and destroy a group of rebels fleeing north. Probably 5,000 people trying to escape after the main battle. Pompey claimed credit for ending the slave revolt, infuriating Crassus. This rivalry between Crassus and Pompey would define Roman politics for years. Their competition for power and prestige helped destabilize the Republic, contributing to the conditions that would eventually end it. But the deeper impact was on Rome's relationship with slavery. You might think that a rebellion this massive, this successful, would have prompted Romans to reconsider their entire system, to question whether enslaving millions of people might be unsustainable, dangerous, wrong. It didn't. Instead, Rome doubled down. Security at gladiator schools was tightened. Slave patrols were increased. Laws governing slave ownership were made harsher. The message was clear. The system wasn't the problem. Insufficient control was the problem. Rome did learn tactical lessons. They improved their intelligence networks among slave populations. They stationed more troops in Italy to respond quickly to unrest. They became more careful about concentrating too many war captives in one place. But they never questioned the fundamental morality of slavery itself. Because Rome couldn't. The entire economy depended on it. The lifestyle of the elite required it. The expansion of the empire, the constant conquering that brought new slaves, was justified by it. To question slavery would be to question Rome itself. It's something to change subtly in the culture. Spartacus entered Roman consciousness in a way few enemies did. Historians wrote about him. Sallust, Plutarch, Appian, others whose works are now lost. They described him with a mixture of contempt and reluctant admiration. They called him intelligent, brave, a natural leader. They noted that he tried to restrain his followers from unnecessary cruelty, that he distributed plunder fairly, that he maintained discipline in his army. These Romans, writing decades or centuries later, couldn't quite reduce Spartacus to simple villainy. He disrupted their narrative of barbarian chaos versus Roman civilization. He proved that the enslaved weren't passive, weren't less capable, weren't the natural inferiors Rome claimed they were. And that made him dangerous, even in memory. Spartacus didn't die when his body fell on that battlefield. He lived on in a way that terrified Roman authorities and inspired everyone else. In the years after the rebellion, his name became code. When slaves whispered about resistance, they invoked Spartacus. When populist politicians wanted to frighten the Senate, They warned of another Spartacus. When Roman authors wanted to discuss the limits of power, they circled back to this gladiator who nearly brought the Republic to its knees. But the story didn't stay in ancient Rome. Through the centuries, Spartacus kept being rediscovered, reinterpreted, remade for different struggles and different times. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as slavery continued in the Americas and revolutionary movements swept Europe, Spartacus became a symbol of liberation. The French Revolution invoked him. Abolitionist movements compared enslaved people rising up to Spartacus rebellion. Revolutionary groups named themselves after him. In the 20th century, he was claimed by communists as a proto-revolutionary, by anarchists as a figure of radical freedom, by anyone fighting against oppression as proof that resistance is possible. This has made him controversial, complicated. Different groups project their own values on a Spartacus, turn him into whatever they need him to be. Was he a revolutionary with a vision for a new society? A desperate man fighting for survival? A military leader who got trapped by circumstances he couldn't control? The honest answer is, we don't know. The sources are too limited, too biased, too distant from events. But maybe that ambiguity is the point. Spartacus represents something more fundamental than any specific ideology. He represents the moment when the oppressed stop accepting their oppression, when property remembers it's human, when the system's victims refuse to stay victims. That moment happens across history, in different forms, in different contexts. And every time it does, someone remembers Spartacus. Not because his rebellion succeeded in its immediate goals, it didn't, but because he proved something that systems of domination desperately need people to forget. That power is never as absolute as it claims. That even the most overwhelming force can be challenged. That human dignity, once claimed, is almost impossible to completely crush. So what do we do with Spartacus? 2,000 years later, standing in the rubble of the Roman Empire, looking back at a slave who became a general, a gladiator who defeated legions, a man who terrified the ancient world's greatest superpower. Spartacus' rebellion failed. Let's be clear about that. Rome crushed it. Slavery continued for centuries. The Republic, and later the Empire, learned almost nothing from the rebellion. At least, nothing they were willing to admit publicly. 6,000 people died on crosses along the Appian Way. Tens of thousands more died in battle or were sold back into slavery. The survivors, if there were any who truly escaped, disappeared into history without names or monuments. By Rome's measure, by the measure of power and victory, Spartacus lost completely. But they never forgot him. Roman historians wrote about Spartacus with a mixture of contempt and grudging respect. They called him a barbarian, a criminal, a threat to civilization. But they also acknowledged his skill, his leadership, his refusal to accept what Rome said was inevitable. They couldn't quite make him the monster they needed him to be. And that's why we still remember his name 2,000 years later. While the names of most Roman senators and generals have faded into obscurity, Spartacus didn't overthrow Rome. He didn't end slavery. He didn't win. But he proved something that empires hate to admit. That power is never absolute. That even the most oppressed, the most forgotten, the most brutally controlled can rise up. That systems built on cruelty and domination are always more fragile than they appear. Every empire tells itself the same story, that its dominance is natural, inevitable, permanent, that resistance is futile, that the way things are is the way things must be. Spartacus for 3 years proved that story was a lie. And every time someone challenges power, every time the oppressed refuse to accept their oppression, every time someone looks at an unjust system and says no, Spartacus is there. Not as a perfect hero, not as a flawless revolutionary, but as a reminder that change is possible, that resistance matters, that human beings have an almost infinite capacity to fight for their dignity. Was he a hero? A visionary? A desperate man who took a terrible gamble? History doesn't give us neat answers. It gives us complicated people making impossible choices under unbearable pressure. But it gives us this, the story of a slave who became a general, who united the dispossessed, who made the greatest empire on earth tremble, who died fighting rather than die on his knees. And it asks us to remember that every system, every structure of power, every institution that claims permanence, all of it depends on the compliance of the people it claims to control. The moment that compliance ends, everything changes. That's what Rome learned. That's what every empire learns eventually. That's what Spartacus taught them. If this story moved you, if it made you think about power and resistance and the price of freedom, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video. Keep these stories alive. And let me know in the comments, was Spartacus a hero or a warning? Was he fighting for liberation or just survival? What would you have done in his position? These questions matter because his story isn't just about ancient Rome. It's about every time someone has to choose between accepting injustice and risking everything to fight it. Thanks for watching. And remember, history belongs to those who refuse to be forgotten. Spartacus refused. His followers refused. And 2,000 years later, we're still talking about them. That's not victory, but it's not defeat either. It's something else. Something that keeps echoing through history every time someone chooses freedom over chains.